So, I recently watched Bullet Train with Brad Pitt in it. Very cool movie, lots of action, and of course, they used virtual production. Which, when you think about it, is probably the ideal use of VP. You know, a train or object that's supposed to be moving. Obviously, you can't move it for filming reasons, so you have an LED wall with a virtual set moving instead. Now, looking into some behind the scenes of the film, it does look like they use pre-rendered videos rather than like a real-time workflow. So today, I'm going to show you how you could do it in real time using Unreal 5. So what we're going to do is we're going to make an infinite train tunnel that just extends beyond forever for your filming needs. But you could still apply this same idea to a forest or a city or anything really. So we're going to start with the tunnel pack by Decocon. Here it is. Classic, I believe. Make sure you have end display enabled. Display. And whatever other plugins you need for running your camera tracking. I'm not using camera tracking today. I'm just going to have a stationary camera, but the principle's the same. So the first thing we need to do is make sure this pack works with Lumen, because it actually does not out of the bat. Despite being ready for having an Unreal 5 download available. So if we go to Lumen and Overview, you'll see there's actually nothing in this preview. So what we need to do is we need to go into the subway tunnel and then into meshes. Then we need to go into these meshes, and I'm just going to select all of them and go Asset Actions, Bulk Edit via Property Matrix, which brings up this window here. In the side, I'm going to search for distance field meshes, and I want to tick generate distance field mesh. So Lumen requires distance fields to work correctly, so we need to make sure we're generating those. And I'm also going to go into the props and do the same. Whoops, not bulk export, bulk edit is generate distance field meshes. And then we can go ahead and save all. Alright, now that we have distance fields enabled, what we can do is go ahead and we'll first create our train or object, I guess, that moves us forward. So I'm going to create a new folder, call this infinite track, I guess. Alright, so we're going to go in and we're going to create a new blueprint, and I'm going to make it a pawn, that way we can control it. I'm going to call this BP underscore train. Go ahead and open it. Now I'm going to create two new variables. Going to make them both integers. Whoops. Integer. I'm going to call one current speed, and then I'm going to call the other one max speed. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we want to add in. So now what we want to do is we want to add in a W key input. So if you just search W input, we should get, here we go, keyboard event W, and then I'm going to do the same for S input or input S. That'll be, yeah, there we go. So then what we want to do is we want to drag out current speed, holding down control to get it, and also max speed, again holding down control to get it. I'm going to drag off of current speed and search equals equals, and then plug max speed into it, and then drag off of this into a branch. Now I'm going to plug the W pressed event into the branch like so. Now, if our current speed is our maximum speed, we don't want to do anything. If it isn't the max speed, then what we want to do is we want to grab the current speed. We want to we want to add 5 to it, because we want to go up in increments of 5, so you don't have to spam the key a million times. And then we want to set current speed. So I'm going to drag it out, and I'm going to hold down Alt this time to change it to a set. So if our current speed isn't our maximum speed, then we're going to increase our current speed. Now I want to copy all of this and put it on the S. So pressed like that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete this and leave it at 0, and then I'm going to remove this one and change it to a subtract, and I'm going to subtract 5. So if our current speed is not 0, then we want to reduce our speed, and if it is 0, then we don't want to do anything. So lastly, to actually make it move, we're going to grab the event tick back. There it is. And then I'm going to search for add actor, and I want add actor world transform, like so. Then I'm going to split the delta transform and then split the delta location, drag out our current speed and plug it into the delta transform location X. So our current speed is going to be somewhere between 0 and whatever we set our max speed at, which I've set to 75. You can set it to whatever you like. And then we're going to add that as a X on our X location every game tick. Alright, so now if we grab ourselves a new level, I'm just going to go to the open world level, like so. What we can do is we can drag out our BP train, move it up a little bit. In the details panel, I want to set auto possess player to player 0, so it possesses us. And then here we can change our max speed if we need to. Now if we hit play and then W, we'll start moving forward. And I can keep hitting W to move faster forward, and I can hit S to slow down. Just like that. Alrighty, next what we need is a tunnel or a train track. But before we do that, we just need to add one more thing, and I'm going to add a new function in this here, and I'm going to call it spawn track. Like so, and we'll be coming back to this in a minute. Next, we need to create our track pieces. So I'm going to create a new blueprint again and just choose actor. I'm going to call this BP underscore track segment. Like that. Go ahead and open it up. What I'm going to do is add an arrow to it. And then I'm also going to add a box collision. And I'm going to make sure the box collision is a child of the arrow. And I'm going to just make the box a bit smaller like that. Make it a bit larger that way, and move it up a bit. Compile, save, the usual. I'm going to add a new variable, leave it as boolean, and call can spawn track, like that. Next, what I'm going to do is click on the box collision and choose on component begin overlap. Now I'm going to grab the other actor. I'm going to cast to BP underscore train, like so. I'm then going to drag out a branch here, and I'm going to put the can spawn track in. I'm going to drag off the BP as BP train, and I'm going to search for spawn track, like so. Now, on the true of the branch, I'm going to put spawn track. I'm then going to search for a delay. I'm going to change it to 2 seconds, and then on the complete, I'm going to drag out and type destroy actor. I'm then going to plug the false into the delay and the spawn track into the delay, like so. So what we're going to do is basically this is going to make up the base of our track segments, and then as our quote-unquote train passes through the track, it's going to hit this box, which is then going to spawn another track and then eventually delete this existing track. So that's how this sort of continuously goes forever. Okay, we're going to finish off with a function. I'm going to call this get snap point, like so. I'm going to, on the outputs here, I'm going to add a new output. I'm going to call it transform, and then I'm going to make it a transform, like so. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag the arrow out, and I'm going to get world location, or get world transform, sorry, like so. And so basically what this is going to do is the arrow here is going to be where the next bit of track spawns. if that makes sense. And it will in a minute, trust me. So basically what we can do is we can call this function and then get the next spawn location of the track. Alright, go ahead and close this. Alright, so now we can go back to BP train and finish off the code in this function. Okay, we're going to drag out a spawn actor from class, like so. Drag back off of class, and I'm going to promote this to a variable. I'm going to call this track segments, like that. I'm going to change it to a, going to change it to an array. So you can do that just by right clicking it or going up here to this little box and selecting array. I'm going to unplug it from the spawn actors. Then I'm going to drag out of it and get a length node. This will get me how many items are in the array as an integer. I'm going to drag off of that and search for random integer in range. Just random integer. There we go. So what we're then going to do is get a random number based on how many items are in the array. I'm then going to get a copy and plug that into that. So basically what we're going to do here is we're going to get one of the random track segments, because we're going to make a few to keep things some variation. We're going to then get a random one and spawn it. Now for the spawn transform, I'm going to drag it off and promote it to a variable, and I'm going to call this one spawn location, like so. Location. That'll do. I think that's spelled wrong. I can't think at the moment. Alrighty, then what we can do is we can drag off of this, and I'm going to cast to BP track segment, like so. Then, as the BP track segment, I'm going to call the function we made, which was get snap point, like so. And then I'm going to drag out the spawn location, set it, and I'm going to set it as that. So what happens is whenever we call this spawn track, which if you remember, it's whenever we hit this box, then we're going to call this, which will spawn a new bit of track at the location of this arrow. So and then we're going to save the new location from this new bit of track. And that's how we're building. I think of Wallace and Gromit. I think it was the wrong trousers with the penguin, and Gromit is following him, and he's like rapidly putting down train tracks. That's essentially what we're going to do. Now we're going to go back to the event graph and grab an event play, or event begin play. There it is. And what I want to do is I want to set a bit of track down to begin with. So I'm going to grab a for loop, just a for loop, there we go. And I'm going to just set the last index as 35. And then I'm going to drag down our spawn track, and for the loop body I'm going to spawn the track. There we go. So that means we're going to spawn 35 bits of track ahead of us to begin with, and then as we go through them, it'll keep creating more, which means we should have at least 35 bits of track at any given time. Now, if you find that you can see in whatever particular camera shot you have, you can see like the end of the map, then just increase this value, and this will increase the amount of track we spawn at the beginning. Lastly, I want to make the track segments a public variable as well, so we can edit them without going into the blueprint. So now let us go and actually make these track segments. So I'm going to create a new blueprint. I'm going to click all classes, and I'm actually going to search for our BP underscore track segment, like so, because I want to make this a child of that blueprint, so we inherit the arrow and the box as well as all the existing code of it. I'm going to call this BP track section 1. Go ahead and add it, and as you can see, we already have our arrow and our blueprint, and although you can't see it, all that other code, here it is, event actor begin overlap. So we're already running that code. So what we can do now is finally go to the Decocon Pack, grab a mesh. I'm going to start with the wall 01B, like so. Now, one thing we need to do is everything needs to be set, everything's orientated like going negative X. We want everything to be going positive X. So I'm just going to rotate it 180. Then I'm going to grab our arrow and move it to the very end, which should be about 800. So our blueprint is going to spawn at this arrow. So the root of the blueprint, which at the moment is here, is going to spawn at the previous blueprint's arrow here. So you can see how they connect together. So we need to make sure these line up both with the root and the arrow, otherwise we're going to either have gaps or overlaps, which we don't want. Now I can also add the floor in. Again, I'm going to rotate it. We also have the tracks that I've made a parent of something. And we've got rails, don't we? There we go. Like so. Now the Decocon Pack has lots of other extras you can throw in, dirt, boxes, like pipes and stuff like that. So I'll throw a few in. What you don't want to do is large repeating details. So that's things like lights, signal boxes, stuff like that you don't want repeating every short section. Mainly because we will be doing something else for those, so I will show you how to do that afterwards. But I'm going to add, let's say, this pipe, these wires, and some vents. And then I'm going to just spin these all around. Didn't even line them up. There we go. So that's looking pretty good so far. Compile and save. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a few more of those. So I'm just going to go to our infinite track. I'm just going to duplicate this, call it number 2, and I might change up some of these to the different meshes they have. So I'm going to go ahead and do that quickly. Alright, so I made 3. You can just go nuts, make as many as you like. But what we should be able to do now is on our little BP train, we have this track segments section. So I can go ahead and add 3 of those. Then I'm going to click these, and I'm just going to use that button to select them. So that one, and that one. Like so. Now the last thing we need to do is, obviously our current system relies on us colliding with this box to spawn another track section. The problem is, at the moment, our character, the train we are, doesn't actually have anything to collide with. So I'm going to add a capsule collision on it, like so, and move it up a bit, and this is just going to be what collides with that box. The other thing we need to do is this wall piece has a really weird collision mesh, so I'm going to go ahead and click on it in our blueprint, scroll down to the collision preset, and I'm just going to say no collision, and I'm going to do that. So compile and save, and I'm going to do that for all of them. No collision, and no collision. Save. So now what we should be able to do is go into simulate mode, and we have a tunnel. So if I go to play mode and we just hit play, we should have a tunnel. As you can see, they're being created and destroyed. Oh. So you can go faster than essentially what it's capable of spawning them at. So do keep that in mind, as there is actually a speed limit on this. But if even this is pretty fast, we should be able to sit here and cruise pretty nicely while our tunnels just continue. Hang on a minute. That doesn't seem to be working correctly. Right, our can spawn track needs to be true by default. My bad. So that's in. So if you just go into the track segment here, and then can spawn track, we want to make that true. That way, That way, we actually spawn track as we go. And now, yeah, here we go. I can really pick up the speed, and we're gonna go through the mesh, and the train just keeps going and going, and this is kind of creepy actually. Light at the end of the tunnel sort of stuff. We can see our variation popping up on the walls and whatnot. How far away am I on the map? Not too far. So we have an infinite tunnel going. Now, one problem is it's very, very dark. Not very interesting to look at. So what we need to do is add some variation to it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I guess I go right click. I can go blueprint class. I'm going to again use the BP underscore track segment. Except I'm going to call this BP track light. Like so. Then I'm going to grab the subway tunnel, the meshes. I'm going to grab this mesh. We will be deleting it, but I just want to use it to line it up. So if we go out and to props instead and find a light you like, I'm going to use this one. Drag it in as well. I'm going to put it on the wall. That way. Oops. Well, it doesn't really line up. There we go. That'll do it. And then I'm going to add a point light on it. Just reset these values because it'll just spawn there. Let's change the temperature down a bit, like so. So then we'll delete this like that, and so now we just have a light ready to go. One thing I forgot to mention is on our track light and any of these extra pieces, we need to drag off of event begin play and search set can spawn track. And basically we want to set this to negative. That way these lights and stuff aren't actually spawning in extra segments of track, only the track is spawning in track. Now I can't add that in here in our I can't add that in here with all of our tracks pieces because otherwise we'll have a track replaced with that piece. But I also want this to just spawn at certain intervals, not randomly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to our spawn track here. I'm going to grab out a sequence instead, like that. I'm going to plug our existing code into the bottom, and then I am going to duplicate the spawn actor and the location and plug it into the top. Now in here I'm going to call BP light. What did I call it? BP track light. BP underscore track light. There we go. Compile and save. Now this will spawn one every single time, which we also don't want. So instead, I'm going to make a function to determine that. So I'm going to start by creating a new variable, and I'm going to call this one track light counter, like so. Integer, and I just want it to be a regular integer. So next what we need to do is we're going to create a new macro. I'm going to call this spawn counter, like so. Now on the inputs, I'm going to have a execution pin. There it is, exec. Oh, wait a minute. There. Now the outputs, I'm going to have two execution pins. So 1, 2. I'm going to call this one spawn, and this one. Actually, let's call it true and false. That's easier. On the inputs, I also want two more. I wanted two integers. I'm going to call this one spawn counter, and this one max count. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag off the spawn counter, search equals, put into the max counter like so. Drag off of this, search for a branch, plug the execution pin into that. On the false, I'm going to search for increment integer, so there's double plus. Then on the true, I'm going to go set ref, and I want set by ref variable. Then I want the true into the true and the false into the false. I'm then going to drag the spawn counter into the plus plus here and the spawn counter into the target here and leave it at 0. So what this is going to do for us is we're going to take in our spawn counter as well as a maximum number. If they're the same, I'm going to set it back to 0. We're going to output true, and if it isn't the max count, then we're going to add 1 to it and then output false. Back in the spawn track, I can drag this in, plug the then into the execution and the true into spawn the light. Then I can drag the track light counter into the spawn counter, and the max count I'm going to set to 4. So this is going to count, this is going to start at 0, count to 4, spawn a light, start again. That means every 4th section is going to have a light in it. Which, there's a light, 1, 2, 3, there's a light, 1, 2, 3, there's a light. And so we can adjust that number for anything. And we can just simply wash, rinse, repeat this right here to then add in any objects we like, whether that's like the signal lamp or just anything really. So let's make some final adjustments. I'm going to add this to a new map and add a few more pieces, and then I'll run you through what I got. Alright, so I went and added a few extra bits and bobs. So we've got signal lamps, they just blink on and off. They show up every now and then, as well as we've got these sort of, here they are, this sort of extra track piece, which also shows up every now and then with a blinking light. And so if we increase our speed a bit, we can see as they come past, they just help add a bit more variety to our setup and our train tunnel. So the way I did it is I've got, for the signal lamp, I just added a signal lamp like we did the light, and then in the train BP, I added a second section on the sequence, a new integer, and duplicated the setup from before. Now, and then that happens every 15. For the section with the door in it, that was a bit trickier, or not really. So I use the spawn counter with the door counter. Now for the false, I had our existing setup, which just spawns randomly. But for the true, I spawned instead this track section piece. And then I duplicated the get transform at the end of it. So now what happens is every 23 pieces, we spawn one of those track segments. Otherwise, everything just runs as normal. For the flickering lights, they're just materials. So this one's a flicker light. This one's a blinking light. So we're just using a sine wave on it. As for the flicker, it's also a sine wave. We just use a frac node as well to make it flicker. These are set as light functions in the material, and then they're applied to the light here in the light function material. So what that means is we now have a bit more variety in our tunnel. As we go past, we have a red blinking light every now and then, or just that blinking light, and so that'll give a bit more variation to our light and our color that we're kicking out as we go past, which will look fantastic on an LED wall. So now to add this to end display, pretty easy. I realized I don't have switchboard enabled, so I'm going to go ahead and enable that. Alrighty, switchboard is now enabled. So I already have an end display config here, although I need to change the resolution of this. That works. This, again, like I said, I'm not using tracking or anything, so this is a really rough setup, but that works all the same. I'm just going to use this camera to be our camera, and I'm going to set this so we've got a bit more field of view. So what I can do is, there we go, miles away that was. So what I can do is drag our config out, and I'm just going to parent it to our train, and then this is where you could just go ahead and position it however you want. I'm just going to position it sort of sideways, I think, like that maybe. Save. Now we're going to go ahead and open switchboard. Where's the button for that? Okay, switchboard didn't give me a button for some reason, but that's okay because I can go ahead and just launch switchboard from the desktop. Here we go. I'm going to create a new config, a infinite train tunnel. That sounds fine to me. End display, populate. Okay, there we go, and then we should connect. Perfect. The last thing you may want to do is go into the config, then go to the screen. Oh, sorry, no, go to the VP node here. And then we do have under rendering a screen percentage, and we can just drop that down nice and low so that our outer frustum renders at a much lower resolution. Just going to help us with performance. Perfect. So what I can do is I can go ahead and just hit launch. It's going to launch up and display eventually. Aha. On the wrong monitor. Great, it's launching on the right map now. So now all we need to do is make sure all the mouse is captured by the end display window. So click on it and then just hit W and we'll start moving forward. So I'll speed things up a bit. So obviously we've got our camera view, which is very different to just the outer frustum view, but just like that. Now end display chugs a bit more so you can actually see the sections spawning in. Yep. So this is why speed is a bit more important in end display. So one trick you can do to increase the speed in end display is, well, not increase the speed, but solve that issue somewhat in end display, which is a bit hacky. But we can grab on the spawn track a for loop and just put it to 2. And so what this will mean is it'll just spawn a couple of track segments every time instead of one. So it's a bit hacky. Doesn't really solve any performance problems. In fact, it might actually make worse ones. However, now this will just make sure it spawns even more track segments whenever we tell it to, rather than just one. Now, obviously, FOVs and stuff make things look like they're maybe not moving as fast as they are in reality, but now we're not going to run into the end of our track anymore. And so just like that, we've set it up and it's running correctly on end display. So thank you for watching. Don't